everybody, my name is Stephanie and today I'm going to be showing you how I painted my Chameleon Skink from the Warhammer Underworld's Diachasm warband, the Starblood Stalkers. I made sure to use a lot of beginner-friendly techniques so that anybody could follow along with what I'm doing. So if you're interested in seeing how I did this, then keep watching.
Alright guys, so here he is. The very first thing that I always try to do when I'm painting a model is make sure that if there are any parts that will be dry brushed, I do them first just so I don't have to be as aggravated later when I'm trying to dry brush and not get it on certain spots. So I'm going in with this chocolate brown color. Any dark brown color will do. We're going to go ahead and handle this branch right off the bat, because I do plan on dry brushing it. I think that when you dry brush wood in particular, it gives it a kind of grainy texture and it makes it look like, well, like wood. So I went ahead and did that. I'm going to mix Skeleton Bone and Monster Brown. These are both Army Painter paints. And we're going to go ahead and do this dry brush. It is a pretty heavy dry brush. So yeah, I do have a lot of paint on the brush and I do go over it a few times in between it drying as I see fit. So however much you want to do it is completely up to you. This is where I decided to stop. I feel like you can see all of the details. I might highlight some of these details a little bit more later, but for now we're going to go ahead and move on. So I have white. What I'm going to do is color correct any of the areas that may have gotten any of the brown on it from dry brushing, and I'm doing this now so that I don't have to worry about it later as I continue to layer on here. So this is just me covering up the spots that got kind of brown from the dry brush. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is go in with a wash, but we're actually not going to use it as a wash. I'm just going to use it to put the slightest little bit of green pigment on the model. So typically when you use a wash, you want it to pool up in those deep recessed areas. For right now, we don't necessarily want that. We just want to cover everywhere with this green color, just like I said, to put that pigment on there. Alright, now that we have all of that green on there, we're going to do another dry brush. We're going to take a bright true yellow color. This is flat yellow from Vallejo, and I am going to dry brush all the high parts of the model. The reason for this is because we are going to be going over with a contrast paint after this, and I really wanted this guy to have some very warm undertones. So by putting this yellow on there before going in with the contrast paint, it makes the color look more the way that I want it to. So I'm going to go ahead in. The contrast paint that I'm using is, oh god, I don't remember off the top of my head. Plaguebearer Flesh. Okay, so I'm going to go in with this, and like I said, because we did that yellow underneath, it will be a very warm color. And I think it looks very chameleon green from within type. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. Alright, that step is done and he's already looking pretty good. The next thing I felt super compelled to paint was this little frog pouch that he's keeping his darts in. And to me it made so much sense to use a poison dart frog that looks like this, because I wanted to add a little bit of contrast to the model overall, but I just thought, oh, it makes sense because he's using poison darts, so let's do a poison dart frog. So I'm going in with this bright orange color, and I'm very careful here just because it was hard to achieve this, or not hard, it took a lot of steps to achieve the skin tone of the chameleon. So if I were to get orange over it, I would have to do a lot of cleanup and a lot of work to get that original color back. So you want to be very careful with these little details all around the model. And yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and keep putting this orange paint on. Now that the little frog's painted, we're going to go ahead and paint the arms and legs of it. So I'm mixing a dark blue and a very small amount of black to get that really dark indigo-y type color. And I'm just carefully placing that on the legs and on the arms. Okay, all done with that. It was looking a little bit too bright, so I'm going to go in with a wash. This is Strong Tone by Army Painter, and I'm just placing that all over the frog, which brings it back to a slightly more natural color, I feel like. And I really like the effect of this wash. It just helps bring out all the details on the little tiny part of the model. I'm going in with a teeny tiny little brush and putting some black eyes on it. And actually, this went pretty well. I got kind of lucky here. I didn't have to do any color correcting or anything. I just placed the black dots on, and yeah, it doesn't always work out that way. I'm going in with a gloss varnish now. This is just on the little poison dart frog. I don't want any of this to get on the chameleon, but I think it just adds a little bit of texture, and if you know me, you know I cannot say no to some gloss varnish. I use it any opportunity that's even slightly acceptable, I'll throw it on there. Alright, so coming in with that same chocolate brown color that we use for the little tree right there, I'm going to pick out these scales on the top of him. I'm being as careful as I can, I don't want to glob the brown paint all over the place. I just really want to pick out the delicate shapes of each individual scale. This did take a little while, but I think the overall effect is worth it. Alright, so I finished that and I went ahead and put a little bit of brown paint on all of the little bumps on his crest just to bring that brown color together. I wasn't really satisfied with the effect just yet, so I decided to place some orange just on the tips of each scale. And what I ended up doing was layering it a bunch because the orange pigment did not want to cover up the brown, obviously. So it took some layers and some stippling, but I finally got it to a point where I felt like it was okay, and then we move on. Next, I am going to go in and do those little spikes on the top of him with Screaming Skull. I'm going to use the same cream color for the spikes as well as the rope that's around his waist that's holding his poison dart frog pouch type thing. So yeah, this I think really helps bring some contrast to the model. And this was probably one of the easier steps. Just throw that color on there. After doing that, I'm going to go over it with a wash. I believe I used Soft Tone. Yeah, I did. So I'm going to put Soft Tone right on there and let it sink into the crevices while being careful not to get it onto my actual chameleon. I wasn't quite satisfied with the look of the spike, so I decided to dry brush a little bit of white on the tips of them just to bring them out a little bit more. And I was very careful here, obviously, not to get any white anywhere else. At this point, I was ready to move on to the eyes, so I decided to use Blue Tone first to just kind of bring more attention to the area. So I ended up doing about 2 or 3 layers of this blue wash just to make it look like it had some color before I moved on to the center of the eye. I then took a pure white color and just went over the innermost rim of his eye. I did want him to look like he had some character and some personality, so I didn't just want to throw the wash on there. I did go over the rim, and then after I went over the rim on both sides, I decided to drop a little bit of Nuln oil in the little crevice in the center of each one. I wasn't brave enough to go in there with black paint, but I trusted the Nuln oil to just kind of slip in where I needed it to be, and it ended up looking kind of cool. All right, we're moving on to all of the parts on him that are metal. So this is Retributor armor. I'm using this as a base coat for all of the metal areas. So this is his little bracelet, and then the parts of his little blowpipe. I'm going over all the parts that I just did with Gilliman Flesh. And this is just a kind of brownie contrast paint. So I'm just putting it over there to give it some dimension and some shade. And then I am going to highlight it with a brighter gold after I finish this step. All right, so at this point I realized I couldn't put it off anymore. I needed to start the tail, which I was really scared about. So I decided to start with just the same green wash we used originally on his skin, and I began washing it. I wasn't ambitious enough to do a full-on wet blend, but I decided to use a bunch of different washes to kind of create a blend where it goes from green to blue. So just by starting with this green tone, I'm distinguishing it from the rest of the flesh. And then I add just 1 drop of blue tone to that green tone. And I keep doing this over and over again. Each time I'm going over less and less of the tail so that it's creating a gradual blend. Once I had worked it up to where it was kind of blue-ish, I decided to go from the other side and start with blue contrast paint on the tip and then work that back around. I messed with this for a while, adding more contrast paint, more washes, messing with it over and over and over again. I gave up here because I got to a point where the more I would work on it, the less I would like it. So this is where I stopped. Okay, so I am moving on to the base. Finally, I'm mixing Desert Yellow and Monster Brown to get this kind of dirty sand type of color. And I actually forgot to film it, but I did wash that with Rakeland Flesh. I'm then going to quickly dry brush with Skeleton Bone. This part's all kind of self-explanatory. I end up going over the plants with a just neutral green color, washing them with Athonian Camel Shade, and then that is kind of it. I think, oh yeah, I picked out some of the little rocks that you see on the base, and then I also used Athonian Camo Shade on the base of the rocks to make them look like they could have some algae growing on them. We have made it to the most satisfying step of all, and that is the black rim. It feels so good to throw a nice black rim on a model that you have spent a while working on. And yeah, I am very happy. All right, he is all done and looking good. I'm really happy with the way that he turned out. As always with me, there are a couple things I look at and I think about ways I could have done them differently, but that's all part of the learning process. And overall, I had a really good time. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!